When I doubled sales, I increased my headaches. I was making less money. I was working twice the hours and I hated the business. They work harder and faster. They do more, they do more, they do more, but it's all revolving around them. What they don't realize is they just made the walls that hold them trapped inside that business. When I check off the steps, I can visually see that the right things happen the right way. What you're doing is you're trapping, you're addicting your company to your presence.
Maui Mastermind presents the Business Coach Podcast, answering your questions and providing real actionable insights for building a better, stronger, more profitable business without sacrificing your time, life, or freedom anymore.
Welcome to the Business Coach. I'm your host, David Finkel. And in this episode, I want to help you avoid the one mistake that nearly every business owner makes. I see this all the time. Having coached several thousand businesses over the last 25 years, I will tell you that I watch this mistake happen again and again. And how can you avoid it? So first of all, what is the mistake? It's building the business so that you, the business owner, stay in, quote, control, close quote. Building for control. Now, why is that a problem? Shouldn't I know what's going on in the business? Shouldn't I be in control? And so there's a very big difference between you being in control versus, you think about business controls with an S, it's a very different thing. And I'll share this with a story. Early on, I remember at a coaching client had referred someone to us that came to a workshop. And so this woman came to the workshop. She owned a home improvement business. At the time she came to us, she was doing about $3 million a year in revenue for this particular home improvement business. So it was a relatively small company. It was her and probably about 15 people, mostly were installers or people in the field doing the actual work. And as I was talking with her at the workshop, one thing became very clear. She said, David, several years ago, I made the decision to scale my business up and I doubled sales. And what I found was that when I doubled sales, I increased my headaches. I was making less money. I was working twice the hours and I hated the business. To the Business Coach, I'm your host, David Finkel. And in this episode, I want to help you avoid the one mistake that nearly every business owner makes. I see this all the time. Having coached several thousand businesses over the last 25 years, I will tell you that I watch this mistake happen again and again. And how can you avoid it? So first of all, what is the mistake? It's building the business so that you, the business owner, stay in, quote, control, close quote. Shouldn't I know what's going on in the business? Shouldn't I be in control? And so there's a very big difference between you being in control versus what we'll call a business control. You think about business controls with an S, it's a very different thing. And I'll share this with a story. So early on, I remember at a coaching client had referred someone to us that came to a workshop. And so this woman came to the workshop. She owned a home improvement business. At the time she came to us, she was doing about $3 million a year in revenue for this particular home improvement business. So it was a relatively small company. It was her and probably about 15 people, mostly were installers or people in the field doing the actual work. And as I was talking with her at the workshop, one thing became very clear. She said, David, several years ago, I made the decision to scale my business up and I doubled sales. And what I found was that when I doubled sales, I increased my headaches. I was making less money. I was working twice the hours and I hated the business. And so I just shrunk the whole thing. And now at the level it's at, I make more than I did when it was twice as big. Yes, I still work hard, but I don't have to work quite as hard because I don't have all the people issues. And I thought, isn't that interesting? And I challenged her with that. And I said, look, let me ask you something. When you scaled up, did you have any structured way in which you did scale up? Did you do scaling up, including things like building out your business processes and procedures and having good internal controls? And I asked her a series of questions. And the answer was she didn't do any of those things. Her way of scaling up was hiring more people to do the jobs, having a little bit of extra admin help, but there was no structured process for how they did systems in their company. And there was no way of making sure that people were actually using their systems, whether they be in the field doing the home improvement work or behind the scenes administratively, to make sure people were using the systems to get the right result in the right way. Challenge her, I said, is it possible that the challenge here wasn't that scaling the business larger was the issue, but it was how you scaled the issue larger? And sadly, at that time, 20-ish years ago, I couldn't get through to her. She left. Our client who referred her to us stayed a client for probably close to 10 years, but this particular person never became a client. She just settled for the business as it was. So I want to share with you how to avoid this very common mistake. I don't want you to build for control. The typical business owner, you think about it, they put themselves at the center and then they build that business around themselves. And if they want to grow, what that means is they work harder and faster. They do more, they do more, they do more, but it's all revolving around them. What they don't realize is they just made the walls that hold them trapped inside that business thicker, taller, deeper. You say, if that's not the answer, what is? And the answer is I need to build my company with great internal controls with an S. What that means is these are the specialized systems that tell you, your staff, and your company that your people are using the right systems in the right way to get the right result. And when I do that, what it does is it allows me to put my systems, my team, my company culture at the center of that business. And now when I do that, company is essentially infinitely scalable. It can be so much more scalable, so much larger it can grow because of that very thing. So let's give a couple examples. Let's be really concrete. Let's say you have a business, it's home improvement. Then I'll give a professional service firm example, and then I'll give a manufacturing example. So we'll do 3 different examples. So home improvement side, like this particular person, she did glass. She did commercial and residential glass, custom showers and other types of things that they would do. And she's got to prepare for a job project. That's an example of an ongoing system. So what would it look like for her? It could be as simple as a planning checklist that before we schedule with the client, we have a simple page of information. Today's it would probably be in a database or CRM that I would enter in this information. I need to know, do we have what the product numbers are that we're going to need to order? Do we have the purchase order back from the person? Do we have any specialty installation instructions? All that needs to be there so that the step 2 can be, I can do my planning for that installation. What kind of talent do I need to install? What type of materials will they need? How long should this take? Where does it fit into our scheduling with that part? I'm going to do that planning. That might be checklist driven, and it also might be a process that's followed to be driven with that part. These are examples of internal controls. A checklist is a visual control. When I check off the steps, I can visually see that the right things happen the right way. I can up the ante by making my project person initial, not just check off, but initial that she has checked off each of these steps. Or maybe I make him sign at the bottom, not for any legal recourse, but just something about taking ownership with that. That's a visual one. Another example of a visual control would be like, for example, in a medical practice, which is a professional services firm. One of the clients we coach, they have a medical practice where they have, I think it is 12 or 14 providers, practitioners, the people doing the services, and they need to schedule for them. And we call one of the ways that we can make sure that we're using them well is we can look at a KPI, key performance indicator of their utilization rate. Hey, I've got these providers, these 12 providers. What percentage of them am I utilizing today, this week? And those numbers of their daily and their weekly utilization are wonderful visual controls that I can see that if that's screwed up, I need to go back and adjust and correct with how my team is doing scheduling. Another type of control is what I'll call a procedural control, the process by which I go through to schedule. Or for the example of a manufacturer, it might be, how do we do shipping? We do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. That recipe of step 1, 2, 3, 4, that's an example of a procedural control. There's one more example of controls that I think are probably my favorite. We'll call these embedded controls. Embedded controls automatically work. And I'll tell you, being a parent is where I first learned about embedded controls. So when my first 2 kids, I've got 3 sons, but when Matthew and Adam, my older 2 twin sons, when they were about 1.5 to about 3 years old, they got into everything. They would get into climb up and grab iPads and other things, and they would get into our phones and they were just everywhere. Or they would play with things that they shouldn't be playing with, things that were breakable or perhaps even dangerous for them. And we turn our back and lo and behold, there they were. And what we learned was that we could tell them, no, don't do that. Or we could take that object out of the environment, either putting it on a shelf that was high enough that they couldn't climb up to, or In our world, we actually had to get some lock boxes that we put stuff into. And even still, it was an arms race to see if we could stay ahead with them. So that's an example of an embedded control. If I can take the laptop I don't want my kids to play with and I can put it in a locked box, then the default is they can't do it. Environmentally, they can't play with it. So what might this look like in a business? Let's say, for example, that my sales team won't submit their expense reports. Okay, great. I tell them, you've got 60 days to submit your expense report. After 60 days, no expense reports, we're not going to reimburse for the expenses. That's an embedded control that forces them to do that. Another example might be a standardized contract. If you have your production people sometimes don't document well enough, a standardized contract that has all the boilerplate protections for your company would be an example of an embedded control. Another example of an embedded control would be sales scripting. Another example of an embedded control might be an automated onboard email drip campaign. So all new clients get the same 6 emails spaced over the first 35 days of working together, and you know that's going to happen the right way. An embedded control is automated, or it makes the default behavior automatically the right one. If we talk about taking the owner out of the middle and putting in systems team and the culture that says we're going to believe in and build these systems and internal processes, procedures, and controls, it's a big deal. So control should not be your goal. Your goal should be to build strategic depth for the business with internal controls with an S in place such that you can know what's going on. We talked about 3 different types of internal controls. We talked about procedural controls. Follow step 1, follow step 2, follow step 3, follow step 4. We talked in there about visual controls so that you can see a scoreboard, a dashboard, metrics, or a checklist that I can check the box with that part. Then I can have one more, which we call embedded controls. And embedded controls work because they make the default behavior automatically the correct one. Standardized contracts, data fields in a CRM that have to be filled out. Tracking, here's a great example in marketing of an embedded control. Doing your tracking such that rather than you having to ask Mrs. Jones how she saw your company, you do your tracking automated through your website or through whatever URLs are being reached out to or by which phone number the person's calling so that the tracking becomes automated. That's an example of an embedded control. So I want you to look at your business right now and ask yourself, have you been guilty of putting yourself at the middle? You've had things that have gone wrong, and your solution is for you to be more vigilant, for you to pay more attention, for you to closer supervise what's going on. And if you do that, you're going to end up in the self-employment trap. You're going to end up as a small business owner that is stuck inside of his or her company. But if you can pull out that model and instead plug in, how do we have strong systems that are being used by our team and a culture that believes in cross-training each other about the use of systems with simple internal controls with an S that let me procedurally, visually, or embedded know that the right things are happening at the right time in the right manner, and makes all the difference in the world. So compare that self-improvement company to one of our other clients. I have a client named Brian, who last summer took off 3.5 months from his business as a sabbatical. And he could do that because of the work they had done to build their systems team and culture using internal controls as a way to make sure that their team were using their systems at the right way at the right time to generate the results that they wanted. The same is there available for you. So again, how do you avoid this mistake that nearly every business owner makes? They think that for me to make sure that things happen, I have to grip tighter. The tighter you grip, what you're doing is you're trapping, you're addicting your company to your presence. And I don't want that for you. 20 years ago in business, that was me. I was gripped onto everything. I wanted to know everything that was going on at all times. And I was working 70, 80 hours a week. It's not a lifestyle choice. If I fast forward to today, taking 5 months off from the business. Today I'm working 30, 35, 40 hours in a typical week. But the way that I've done that as the business is more than 100-fold larger in terms of profitability is because we put great people empowered with really good systems, with a culture of using that. And we have good internal controls in place so that myself and our leaders and managers know what's going on. And if things are going out of bounds, we can course correct, not after a year, not after a quarter, not even after a month, but after even a few days or a week of seeing things drifting one way or the other. I want the same for you. Thanks for watching The Business Coach. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you take as your most important takeaway. Are you building your business for control, gripping, or are you building your business so that the business has internal controls to protect itself? One leads to trapping you in a small business trap. The other leads to a scalable business that leads to profit, growth, and freedom. I hope you make the right choice. Thank you, and best of luck.